Well, for the last few weeks, as I've been packing up all of my life's belongings, there are a few items that seem to pop up in each and every room of my house. I can't escape them. And one of the items that I have encountered most are journals. So many people have given me over the years journals as gifts, even some of you here probably. Some I've bought myself. Some of these journals I've read over and over again, especially ones that I've taken on trips. Some of them are empty, awaiting future events. But many of them, far more many than I would like to admit, were started, with the best of intentions, probably in the month of January, and they have just a few pages of writing on them, and then blank. And all of these empty and unfinished journals came to my mind as I read the words of our New Testament lesson from 2 Peter. We do not follow cleverly devised myths, but we had been eyewitnesses of His majesty. And as I was preparing for today's message, that was the phrase that I couldn't get out of my head. Eyewitnesses of His majesty. If I titled my sermons, that's what this one would be titled, Eyewitnesses of His Majesty. And as that phrase was rolling around in my head, I thought about all of those empty pages of journals. I wondered if I would have been a better eyewitness for Jesus, if I had filled all of those pages with various transfiguration-type stories, encounters with God for me to look back on. Like Peter, James, and John, sometimes I find that I just don't know what to say or do when I have a God sighting in my life. I think most of us, at least many of us here, have had them, and I think most of us are probably looking for them. It may even be why you're here today. We want to see God more and more in our daily lives. It's the reason many of us come to church. We want to catch a glimpse of God, or at least remind ourselves of what God is like, so that we can recognize God's presence when we see it. But then when we do, we don't know how to respond. At least I don't always know how to respond. We crave God's presence. And yet, even though no one is telling us to keep our encounters a secret, sometimes I feel like I just don't have the right words to describe the experience. I know that it is good that I am there, and yet I don't have the words to capture this experience with God. And so most of the time, I feel like I would make a terrible eyewitness. So as I was reading this transfiguration story and the lesson from 2 Peter, I found myself overwhelmed with this feeling of thankfulness and gratitude that Peter, James, and John didn't have that same fear, or they had fear, we're told, but eventually they overcame that fear, and they didn't let the fear of not having the right words stop them from sharing their story. I mean, it's a pretty strange story. No one else that they knew had ever seen Moses or Elijah or heard a voice from a cloud. And I'm sure that that his face shone like the sun, that his clothes were dazzling white, don't really do justice to what they experienced. But they didn't let that stop them. They didn't let that stop them from making sure that people knew that this was God's Son. They had heard it from God directly. This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. They heard it from God. And that's the point. More than the details of what it looks like when God breaks into our lives, because it will look different for you than it will for me, the point is that God breaks in. The details can fade into the background. The important part is that God showed up. And so whether you see or hear or touch or taste or feel or smell God's presence, the point is that God was there. And if you can get that much across, that much of the story across to those who know and trust you, it's probably enough. The Holy Spirit will take care of the rest. But that's a hard truth for me to remember. Because, well, maybe I've seen too many courtroom dramas, but when I think about being an eyewitness, right, an eyewitness for God's majesty, I imagine that I need to make sure I have my story straight. I need to have all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed, and I need to anticipate all of the possible questions that the cross-examiner is going to give me, and I have to have my answers ready. But here's the thing. 9 times out of 10, there's no one cross-examining. Sure, there may be a skeptic every now and then, but when we share our encounters with God, encounters that are filled with awe and wonder, most listeners will be caught up in God's majesty right along with us. So think about it. The only reason that we have this story of the Transfiguration is because eventually Peter, James, and John told someone. They told a friend, who told a friend, who told a friend, who told a friend. And thankfully, we have the story to strengthen us in our time of need, to remind us of who Jesus is. And so that's what I was getting at with the children's sermon. When something strange or out of the ordinary happens during our day, we're pretty likely to bring it up at the dinner table. That is, if we actually eat dinner at a table, which is probably part of our storytelling problem. We know that we can't necessarily do the story justice, right? We know that sometimes you just had to be there. And yet, when we experience something strange or extraordinary, it's likely to come up. We bring it up anyway, even when we can't do justice to the story. And so my message for you this morning is that sharing God moments can be that easy. It's just like sitting around the dinner table talking about your day. And this is why practicing the faith in our homes is so important. This is why we have a volunteer here at church that sends newsletters to all the parents of the babies that we baptize with age-appropriate ways to talk about God from birth, from infant stage. And experts will tell you that it takes 5 minutes. It It just takes 5 minutes at the end of your day to instill this practice into your children, into your family life. And what I love about this telling of the Transfiguration story in Matthew is that it reminds us that it's never too late to start. The story doesn't make sense until the resurrection. And so that's when they told it. And the same is true for our stories as well. It doesn't matter how many empty journal pages you wish you filled. God will show up again. There will always be another opportunity, another chance to write it down or to talk about it at the dinner table. As I often remind my confirmation class, the disciples rarely got it right on the first try. And so it's okay if we don't either. Now, there's not nearly enough time this morning for me to share with you all of the transfiguration moments that I've had here with you all at God's Love for the past 4.5 years. All the moments that started out as ordinary, but were changed into moments where I saw, heard, touched, felt, smelled, and tasted God's presence right here among you. And so even though I don't have time to tell you all the stories, believe me, I have been an eyewitness right here in this place to these things. And those encounters and those stories will travel with me to North Carolina and beyond. Several weeks ago, Pastor Dan and I joked that this was an appropriate reading for today, for my last Sunday, because it reminds us that even when we want to stay, we can't. We have to go back down the mountain. But, unlike the disciples, we don't have to keep what happens there a secret. And so I have a parting challenge for you all. You know how I often like to issue challenges when we get close to the end of the sermon. So my parting challenge is this. During Lent, I know that Pastor Dan will be encouraging you to engage in a variety of spiritual practices, including the devotional that you can pick up on your way out. And my challenge is this. When you encounter God, not if, but when you encounter God during one of these Lenten practices, I want you to tell someone. Now, you can even email me if you want. Now, you don't have to find someone on the street corner. You don't need to pick a stranger. It can be anyone, someone in your family. It can be your spouse, your best friend, your child, the person sitting next to you in church the next week. It can even be an empty journal page so that you tell your future self. It doesn't matter who or how you tell the story, but the act of telling it will strengthen your faith and someone else's. The event of God breaking in may become even stronger and more powerful the more times you tell the story. It's like my grandmother's favorite hymn, I love to tell the story. When God shows up, the story never gets old. So brothers and sisters, thank you. Thank you for the privilege of sharing your holy stories with me these past few years, and for letting me share mine with you. Thanks be to God. Amen.